Welcome to you friends. Again learn architecture and coding. Today we will learn Identity Server 4 with Angular.js 6. Grant type is resource owner password. It means we will create a login page in Angular.js 6. User will input their user ID and password, then send the user credential to the Identity Server 4. Identity Server 4 will validate the user credential and send the response to the client as a token. Client will store the token at the client end and then send the next request to the resource, means the web API or any other resource, for fetching the information from there. But client will always send the token with each and every request, and client will validate against that token. If there is any change in a token, then client will be the invalid client and client will not get the information from the resource. What is Identity Server 4? Identity Server is a free open source OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0 framework for ASP.NET Core, and Identity Server 4 acts as a central authentication server for multiple applications. Identity Server 4 is used for single sign-on and access control for modern web applications. What is need of the Identity Server 4? Today, only providing the user ID and password is not enough for securing our software. There should be some solid mechanism that will secure our user ID and password. Then Identity Server 4 provides a way to secure the user ID password by validating the user against their credential, and if the user is valid user, then Identity Server 4 generate a token and send that token on the client side, and client will store the token. Here, how Identity Server 4 secure our application? This is called the user. User is a person who is using the application, and this is a client app created in Angular6. This is Identity Server 4, and this is the resource that is called the web API. User open the client application, then login page comes. User will input the user credential and click on user credential, means user ID and password, and click on the login. Then user ID and password sent to the Identity Server 4. Identity Server 4 validates the user against the database, or in this mechanism we are validating the user against the database. So validate the user. If user is valid, then send the token to the client. Then next request is client send the request with the token to the web API resource for fetching some information from there. So web API send the same token that sent by the client to the Identity Server 4 for validation of that user. So Identity Server 4 validate the user and give the response to the web API, yes, it is a valid user. Then web API return the response, means the return the data to the client app. So what actors in the Identity Server 4? We have seen in our image that user is a person who uses the client application. And what is the client application? Client is application that requests the token from the Identity Server 4 for user validation and send the request for using the resource and fetching the information from the web API. Currently in this application we are using resource as a web API, so user fetch the information from the web API. What is Identity Server 4? Identity Server 4 is an application that is responsible for validating the user against their credential in a database and send the token to the client. And what is the resource? Resource is application like as the web API application that provide the data or information to the client application that user can see there. How to, that's enough. This is all about the theory of Identity Server 4. Now we will create a client application. So this is the process of how to create an Angular6 client application. So we will create an Angular6 project as usual using the ng new Angular project. In this video I am using the Angular client as a project name. I am using routing flag there whenever I am creating the project, so it will create the root module for us whenever it is creating the new Angular project. Then we will create a root guard because in routing module we will use the can activate, and in can activate we will provide the root guard so that we will not go each and every component and validate that the, is client having the token or not. So we will check this token in a root guard, and whenever we will change the root, so request will go through the root guard and we will check there. Client having the token, yes, then he can change the root, otherwise he cannot change the root. Then we will create a login page we will create because we will provide the user information like the user ID and password and send the information to the Identity Server 4 for validating that user against the database and send the token to the user. And in the login component we will create a method. In that method we will provide a grant type as a resource owner password and client credential for fetching the information, for fetching the token from Identity Server 4. This is all about the Angular 6 client. Now we will move to the Identity Server 4 and we will see how to create Identity Server 4 application. So this is also very simple like as our Angular client application. We will create a new MVC project by using the .NET CLI. You can create your project by using the Visual Studio 2017, but we can also create the same project with the .NET CLI command. So here this is the .NET new MVC, provide the name, and I am using the Identity Server. You can provide the name as per your requirement. Next thing that is most important for us is to add the package Identity Server 4. So we will use the .NET CLI. I am using here the .NET CLI, and this is very simple. We will use the .NET add package Identity Server 4, and this will add the package in our Identity Server application. Next step is open the startup.cs file and do the configuration. Now our project creation and Identity Server 4 package installation part is done. It's time to do the configuration for Identity Server 4. So we will first choose the configure service method. In configure service DI containers, we will inject these lines there. These lines are very simple. We will have the service.add identity server. So this will inject the identity server in ASP.NET Core DI container, and then also because this is the developer version, so here we are using the add developer signing credential. You can and here add in memory clients, we are using the clients, then add in memory API resources and identity resources. So here we have created one class that is called the config class, and we have a static method in the config class that is called the get clients, get API resources and get identity resources. Next thing is, because we are validating the user against the database, so we will create a custom resource owner password validator. So here we will inject the iResource owner password validator service in DI container of ASP.NET Core, and one more service that is called the iProfile service. So after injecting this service, configure service method is finished. Now go to the configure method in startup.cs file and write only single line app.use identity server 4. That's finish the configuration of startup in Identity Server 4. We have injected two services in Identity Server 4, if you have remembered that. One is the iResource owner password validator and other is the profile service, iProfile service. So we will create a two class that is called, one is called the resource owner password validator inherited by iResource owner password validator, and one class that is called the profile service inherited by the iProfile service, and implement the method of iResource owner password validator and iProfile service. So iResource owner password validator, we will validate the users against the database. Next thing is, we have seen that in startup.cs we have a method that is called the get clients. So we will create a config class. Here we have a config class and we have a static method get clients. This will provide the client information. So here the client ID is Angular6 client credential, client name is Jaising, allow grant type is grant type dot resource owner password, and allow access token via browser is true. Then we will have a redirect URI. We will provide the client secret. So these configuration and these client configurations are very simple. After providing this client configuration, we will have also the API resources and identity resources. So we will provide the API resources, API 1 my API. You can change the name of the API. In this video I am using the demo API, so that I have here the API 1 name as API 1, and then get identity resources. Identity resources is the open ID, profile and email. You can also add or remove the email or any other things. That's it. Finish the Identity Server 4 configuration. So this is a very simple configuration. Now next step is how to secure our resources. So resources secure, first we will create a resource, means the web API application, and this is very simple. Use the .NET CLI. We will create a web API named as the API resource. You can change the name as per your requirement. Then install one package that is called the Identity Server 4 Access Token Validation in the application, and this is also installed by the .NET CLI command, and this command is .NET add package Identity Server 4 dot access token validation, and then open the startup.cs file of the web API and add in configure service method the service.add authentication, and authentication type is the bearer. So here we will use the bearer. Then add identity server authentication, and in option we will provide the authority name, means the identity server address, and API name that we have given there like as the API 1. In configure method of the web API, we will use or we will write a single line that is called the app.use authentication. Then we will go to the web API controller and authorize each and every action or full controller by using the attribute called the authorize attribute. This is all about the securing of our web API applications. This is all about the theory of Identity Server 4, how to create the Angular client application, how to configure Angular client, Identity Server 4 and web API. Now it's time to implement all those theory in a practical. So I have created 3 projects. One project is called the client project, and as we have seen there, I have created 2 pages. One page is called the home page and another page is called the login page. So, and this is our app module. In app module, there is nothing new. Only we have implement a HTTP client and forms module here. One new thing here that we can discuss, that is called the routing module. In routing module, we will have a 2 route. One is called the home and another is called the login. In home, we are using the root guard, that is called the can activate auth guard, and in login we are not checking that user is having the token or not. So this is also very simple. Now we will create a login page, then go to the login page, because if user doesn't have, so let us open the auth guard here. This is the auth guard, and we have implement the can activate interface here. This can activate, in the can activate, if we have stored the token in session storage. So if session storage, that is called the token, having the value, and also the value is greater than value length is greater than 20. So we will return the true. Otherwise, whenever the user will change the route, it will redirect to the login only. So user cannot see any other route or any other page if user doesn't have the valid token. So this is all about the token. We will go to the login module and we will have a simple login page. This login page contains only the two input text, and one input is called the user ID and other input is called for providing the password. And we will have a two button. One button is for login and another button is for register. Let's open our login component.ts file. Here in login component.ts file, you can see that Angular way of calling. Here I have created one method and named as Angular way. We can change this method and we can call all these by the JavaScript way, so that I have written here the Angular way of calling the method. And we will provide some information here. So ground type is password. We will send the username as this.userid that we will provide in input box. Password is this.password and client ID is Angular5 client. Then client secret is secret. If you have remember, we have seen in the Identity Server 4 config file, and then this is the address of the Identity Server 4. We will use this address. You can host your Identity Server 4 on the IIS and use that address, or whatsoever you would like. You can use the Identity Server 4 address here. Then we will send the form data with the client credential true, and we will, if user is a valid, then we will fetch the token from there. Then we will save that token in the session storage and navigate the URL to the home page. Otherwise, we will provide the wrong user ID password message to the user. So that's all about the Angular6 client. Now we will move to the Identity Server. So we have seen in our PowerPoint presentation that configuration is start with the configure services method, and we will have some configuration here. We will have add course for cross-origin resources, and here service dot same that we have seen there in our PowerPoint. I have copy paste from there and just paste here. Copy from the PowerPoint and paste here. So this is the services dot add identity server. Then here this is the config class, get clients, get API resources, get identity resources, and we have created the resource owner password validator and profile service class, and implement the iResource owner password validator and iProfile service class. Now move to the configure method, and only single line is written here, is called the app.use identity server. So in startup configuration of identity server is finished, Now we will open the two file that is called the profile service and resource owner. So first we will see the resource owner. Here I am using the my user manager. This is like as the database service, and I have in my user manager I have a method, and I would like to find, this is the user list, and here I have stored the username with their password. So once user will click on the login button, so he will come to the validate async method. Here we will find the username and password from the context, and we will find this username in our database. If user is available, then we will validate the user password here from the database. If user name and user password is a valid for the user, then we will provide the token to the user. So you can have many claims as per your requirement from the database. I am sending the username in a claim. Then we will have a profile service method. Here I am using the my user manager, and the same, this user manager is replaced by the actual database service. And here I am finding the subject, and here if subject means the user ID that we have seen here in my user manager. We will find there the ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and if subject is not null, then we will find the user according to the sub and get the claim of that user, and this is the get claim method. Here I am finding the claim method, and we can find this claim method from the database and add into the claim, and then return the claim principal from here. And then we will return the context dot issued claims as the claims dot toList. So we are using the resource owner password and profile service for validating the user and sending the token to the client. This my user is database service that is responsible for validating the data from the database, and this is the my user class. I have stored only the three property, that is called the ID, username and password. So this is all about the Identity Server 4 configuration and creation of the class. Now we will move to the last configuration, that is called the resource or web API configuration. And in web API configuration, we have seen in our PowerPoint presentation, we will add the Identity Server 4 access token validation package, and then we will configure our web API resource by adding the add authentication token like as a bearer token, and then here we are providing the authority. Authority means the Identity Server 4 address from where you are fetching the token in the client, because we will provide this address and the client token is validated against this address whenever client need to fetch the information from the web API. And here I am providing the API name like as the API 1. Then we will go to the controller of this API and we will attribute, or we would like to secure the action method in a controller or full controller. We can authorize, otherwise we can authorize each and every action method separately by using the authorize attribute. So here I have implemented the authorize attribute on the get name action method and return as the JSON string. So if user is authorized user, then it will return the JSON as the name, otherwise it will return the 401, that is called the not authorized. So that's all for configuration and creation of the Angular client, Identity Server 4 and Web API. Now it's time to run every application and see the result. So here ng server now I am serving the Angular client application. Now press F5 in Identity Server 4 application and now open the third one. This is called the Web API application. Here let's see your first and yes, your client application has been executed, and this is your client application. Your Identity Server 4 application has been executed also. Now come to the Web API and press F5. I have used the Visual Studio Code for writing these applications. You can use the other editor for writing your application like as the Visual Studio, but Visual Studio Code is very good free of charge editor, so you can also use. So all three applications are running. Now you can see here like as the API values, and you will find the values. If you will send get name, we will call then error 401. Now if you will write here the home page, then you will redirect to the login page because you do not have the valid token. So here you will go and write the username. Username is Adesh, password is Singh. You have seen in Identity Server 4 user manager class, and you will click on the login page. On clicking of the login page, if this is the valid user, then you will redirect to the home page, and from there if you will click on the call API, then you will call the API method that is called the get name, and this method return the JSON. So now I am clicking on the login page. Yes, you are the valid user, so you have redirected to the home page. And if you remember, I have written here the home page. but I have redirected to the login page because at that time we don't have the valid token. In this time we have the valid token, so it's time to call the web API resource and send our bearer token with the request, and our API will validate here. If we will call the get name method, then API will validate and return the response like as my name Jaising. Yes, you got the information from there, and suppose that if you will change something, so first you will stop and you will change the information like as the identity server 4, and now press the F5, and after pressing the F5 it will run, and you will go again to the client application and click on the login button. Now you will click on the login button, then what will be the value of this name is equal to Jaising. Instead of this we will get the new value from there, that is called the Identity Server 4. So this is all about the how to implement Identity Server 4 with the Angular 6 and calling the API, web API by very secured way. So thank you for watching my video.